I was sitting at my kitchen table in Levenshaam on a Tuesday morning in January of 2010, going through 8 years of bank statements. Not because anything had gone wrong. Nothing dramatic had happened. I was 63 years old, retired for 8 years, house paid off, pension coming in every month, sons grown and gone. I was going through the statements because I had nothing else scheduled that morning, and the folder had been sitting on the shelf since 2009, and I am not a person who lets folders sit. I got through the first year in about 40 minutes. Fine. The second year, fine. By the time I reached 2006, I had a column of figures on a piece of paper beside me that I had not expected to write down. By the time I finished 2009, that column added up to 11,340 pounds. Not a fraud, not a theft, not a single large mistake. 11,340 pounds, gone in amounts between £6.99 and £47 a month. Invisible individually, catastrophic collectively. 8 years of small exits through doors I had left open without checking whether anything useful was still coming through them. I drove buses in Manchester for 31 years, the 192 route, Hazel Grove to the city center, there and back, day in and out. The one thing I knew about passengers was this: people don't miss their stop because they don't know where they're going. They miss it because they stop paying attention for 4 minutes and the bus keeps moving while they're not watching. I had missed 8 years of stops. I am going to tell you about the 7 categories on my list. But I need to tell you something else first, because if I go straight to the categories, you'll write them down and file them, and the folder will sit on your shelf the same way mine did. The callus on my left palm at the base of my thumb, 31 years of the same steering wheel, same grip, same spot. I rub my right thumb across it sometimes without knowing I've started. I notice it now. That callus is what inattention costs when it accumulates. You stop noticing the pressure because the pressure is always there. Then one day you look down and the damage is structural. The first person I need to tell you about is my neighbor Shirley. Shirley retired from the NHS in 2004. Ward administrator, Wythenshawe Hospital, 27 years. Organized woman, competent. The kind of person who had spreadsheets for her Christmas card list and knew the make, model, and service history of every appliance in her house. In 2011, I showed Shirley my column of figures and explained what I'd found. She said that was very interesting and she'd have a look at her own accounts sometime. I observed her not look for 2 years. In 2013, she mentioned, without particular emphasis, that she'd finally gone through her direct debits and found a gym membership she'd been paying £38 a month since 2007. The gym had changed its name twice and moved locations once in that period. She had not been inside it since September of 2008. That is £38 multiplied by 53 months, £2,040 for a building she had not entered in 5 years. She was not angry about it. That was what I noted. She said, "Oh well," in the tone of a woman reporting a minor weather inconvenience, and moved on. The evidence suggested she had filed it under bad luck rather than inattention. Those are different diagnoses requiring different remedies, but Shirley's gym membership was not the interesting one on her list. I'll come back to what the interesting one was, because that's the part that makes the whole thing land differently. The second person I observed was a man named Terry Ashworth. He drove the 197. We overlapped briefly when I transferred across in 1988, and he retired in 2006 at 58, early medical, bad knee. Terry was not organized the way Shirley was. Terry was the kind of man who kept receipts in a carrier bag and called that a filing system. But Terry had a habit I noted across the 5 years after his retirement that I observed closely enough to document. Every time something went up in price, energy bill, broadband, phone, Terry called to complain, and then accepted whatever the company offered him to stay. A £15 credit, 3 months free, a new contract at a rate only slightly worse than what he'd been on before the increase. What I concluded from Terry was that he was expending real effort, time, irritation, several phone calls per year for outcomes that looked like victories in the moment and were, when I added them up across 5 years, a net loss of approximately £340 per year compared to what he would have saved by simply switching. Terry was not passive. Terry was very active. He was just active in the wrong direction, working to preserve existing arrangements rather than examining whether the arrangements were worth preserving in the first place. That is a specific and very common mistake. Most people watching this make Terry's version of it at least once a month. You put effort into keeping something you should have already left. The effort makes you feel like you've dealt with it. You haven't. You've renewed it. Now I need to tell you the principle underneath both cases, because the 7 categories I'm going to name are all symptoms of the same thing. What I observed across my own 8 years of statements, Shirley's situation, Terry's pattern, and frankly every retired person I have spoken to closely enough about money in the past 14 years, is this. The drain is never the big exit. Everyone monitors the big exits. People know what their mortgage costs, what their car costs, what their largest bills are. The drain is always the small, consistent exits that each fall below the threshold of decision-making. That threshold, the point at which you decide something is worth examining, is different for everyone. For most people, it sits at somewhere around 30 to 50 pounds a month. Anything below that tends to auto-renew, auto-continue, auto-stay, individually invisible, together a bus that has been moving while you weren't watching. I need to stop there and tell you what Shirley's interesting one was, because I promised I'd come back to it. It was a magazine subscription from 2001, a cookery magazine, £9.99 a month. Shirley had subscribed when she was still working because she'd been cooking a lot that year and liked the recipes. She retired in 2004 and started cooking less because her husband had died in 2003, and cooking for one is a different occupation than cooking for two. She did not cancel the magazine. It arrived every month. She put it on the stack in the kitchen. The stack, by 2013, was 144 issues of a magazine she hadn't opened since approximately issue 40. £9.99 multiplied by 144 months is £1,438.56. For a stack of magazines she stepped around when she went to the kettle. What I concluded from the magazine was not about money. What I concluded was that Shirley had a subscription to a version of her life that no longer existed, a version where she cooked enthusiastically for another person, and she had been paying for it every month because canceling it would have required her to formally acknowledge that version was gone. At £9.99 a month, that acknowledgement felt too expensive. That is how the drain actually works. It is not laziness. It is not stupidity. It is that certain small payments function as quiet agreements to keep a door open, and closing the door means admitting something about where you actually are versus where you once were. You have at least one Shirley magazine on your list. You already know which one it is. The callus on my left palm. I am rubbing my right thumb across it now without having decided to. My own list, when I finished the column in January 2010, had 7 categories. I am going to name them plainly because the names are not the hard part. The hard part is the Shirley problem, deciding to look at each one honestly rather than filing it under the weather. The first was unused subscriptions. Not just forgotten, some I remembered perfectly and renewed anyway because canceling required a phone call I kept not making. The total across 8 years, £874. The second was insurance I had duplicated. 3 separate policies with overlapping coverage 2 of which I'd taken out in the same year when I bought the house and never rationalized. Total overpayment across 8 years, £1,120. The third was mobile and broadband contracts I had never renegotiated after the initial term ended. I went on to rolling monthly rates that were on average £18 more per month than the equivalent deal available at the time. 8 years, $1,728. The fourth was what I call loyalty tax, the premium charged to customers who stay versus customers who switch. Energy, home insurance, contents insurance. Providers raise rates for existing customers more than for new ones. Staying without checking is a decision, whether you make it consciously or not. My loyalty tax across 8 years, £2,340. The fifth was food and household subscriptions I'd set up during particular phases. A wine club from 2004, a coffee delivery from 2007 that had outlasted the phase by several years each. £612 total. The sixth was financial products I didn't understand and therefore didn't close, a savings account earning 0.1% interest while I had a credit balance that was costing me more, an ISA I'd contributed to in 2003 and never moved despite better rates being available every year after. The opportunity cost here is harder to calculate precisely, but the evidence suggested a conservative floor of £1,800 in foregone interest over 8 years. The seventh was the one I found hardest to put a number on, and it is the one I want to spend a moment on before I close, because it is the most expensive item on anyone's list and it almost never appears in articles about saving money. It was time. Not time in the abstract. I mean specific, accountable hours. The evidence suggested I had spent, across 8 years of retirement, approximately 340 hours doing tasks that existed solely because I had not canceled, renegotiated, or simplified the arrangements producing them. Chasing incorrect bills, being on hold to query charges, filing paperwork for products I should have closed years earlier, opening and sorting posts for accounts that should not have still been active. 340 hours. At 8 hours a day, that is 42.5 working days. I am 79 years old. I would like those 42.5 days back. I cannot have them. You are not 79 yet. Do your column. Not because the money is the point, though the money is real and you should want it, because the 340 hours is the point, because every arrangement you have not examined is a small continuous demand on your attention, and attention in retirement is not a renewable resource the way it seems to be when you're still working, and attention is structured for you by a schedule. When the schedule ends, attention is all you have to allocate. The quiet drains are not draining your bank account. They are draining that. The callus on my left palm does not hurt, has not hurt for years. It is just there, under my right thumb, structural. 31 years on the 192. I watch people miss their stops every single day. Not foolish people, not careless people generally, just people who stopped watching out the window for 4 minutes and then looked up and were somewhere they hadn't meant to be. Check your direct debits this week. All of them. Write the number down on a piece of paper the way I did and look at it once, plainly, without filing it under anything. You're not going to like the number, but you'll like knowing it more than you'll like not knowing it. The bus keeps moving whether you're watching or not. The question is whether you know where you are.